It was a dark and stormy night, the kind that sends shivers down your spine. I had just moved into a small, old house on the outskirts of town. The creaking floorboards and dim lighting gave the place an eerie atmosphere. My friends warned me about the house, saying it had a haunted history, but I dismissed their tales as mere superstitions. As the days went by, strange things began to happen. I would hear footsteps in the hallway when I was home alone. Doors would slam shut without any explanation, and objects seemed to move on their own. I tried to attribute these occurrences to the old house's quirks, but deep down, I knew there was something more sinister at play. One evening, while sitting in the living room, I felt an icy cold breeze sweep through the room. The temperature dropped drastically, and my breath became visible. Terrified, I glanced around, trying to find the source of the chilling air. That's when I saw her, a young girl, no older than 10, standing at the edge of the room, staring at me with hollow, black eyes. I wanted to scream, but no sound escaped my lips. The girl's presence filled the room with an overwhelming sense of sorrow and despair. As quickly as she appeared, she vanished, leaving me trembling with fear. Determined to find out more about the house's history, I visited the local library to dig into the town's archives. I discovered that the house had once belonged to a family in the late 1800s. Tragedy struck when their young daughter, Emily, mysteriously disappeared one stormy night. They searched for her tirelessly, but she was never found. The family moved away, leaving the house abandoned for years. Armed with this information, I delved deeper into the mystery surrounding Emily's disappearance. Rumors of her ghost haunting the house circulated among the townspeople. Some believed she was trapped, unable to move on until her soul found peace. I couldn't shake the feeling that Emily's spirit was trying to communicate with me. I decided to conduct AES-ons with a group of friends to try and contact her. We gathered in the living room, surrounded by flickering candles, and called out to Emily's spirit. At first, nothing happened, but gradually the atmosphere shifted. The air grew heavy, and the candles flickered wildly. Suddenly, a low, mournful wail echoed through the room. It sent chills down our spines, and one of my friends screamed in terror. The room felt like a vortex of negative energy, and I knew we had opened a door we shouldn't have. As we hurriedly ended the essence, I realized that we had awakened something malevolent within the house. From that moment on, the hauntings intensified. The girl's apparition became more frequent, and I started having vivid, disturbing dreams of her pleading for help. I couldn't escape the feeling that Emily wanted me to uncover the truth behind her disappearance. I continued my research, and with the help of a local historian, I learned that Emily's parents were suspected of foul play in her vanishing. They were rumored to have hidden her body in the house's basement to avoid scrutiny from the authorities. Determined to find closure for Emily's spirit, I ventured into the house's decaying basement. It was damp and musty, with old cobwebs stretching across every corner. As I descended the creaky stairs, I felt a malevolent presence closing in on me. Using a flashlight, I explored the basement's dark recesses. Among the debris and forgotten belongings, I stumbled upon an old chest tucked away in a corner. With trembling hands, I opened it and found a bundle of letters tied together with a faded ribbon. The letters revealed a heartbreaking truth. Emily's parents had indeed been responsible for her death, driven by greed and a desire to collect her inheritance. The letters painted a picture of a young girl tormented by her own family, desperate for someone to save her. As I read the last letter, a blood-curdling scream echoed through the basement. The walls seemed to close in around me, and I felt a cold hand grip my shoulder. I turned around to find the ghostly figure of Emily standing before me. Her face was contorted with pain and sorrow, and her eyes pleaded for justice. I knew then that I had to help her find peace. Clutching the letters, I spoke to her softly, promising that I would make sure her story was known, and that her family would pay for their sins. With each word, the room grew brighter, and the malevolent energy dissipated. Emily's ghost began to fade, and a sense of calm filled the basement. I felt her spirit finally find solace as she moved on to the afterlife. In the days that followed, the hauntings ceased. The house felt different, lighter, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. I kept my promise to Emily and shared her story with the townspeople, exposing the dark secrets of the past. The house on the outskirts of town eventually found new owners, and I moved away, forever changed by my chilling personal experience. I couldn't forget the haunting gaze of Emily's ghost, nor the eerie feeling of being surrounded by the supernatural. To this day, I wonder if Emily's spirit still lingers in that old house, or if she has finally found peace. The memory of that terrifying night will always haunt me, a constant reminder of the thin veil that separates the living from the dead, and the chilling mysteries that lie hidden in the shadows. As years passed, the memory of that fateful night continued to haunt each of us in different ways. The events of that night were etched in our minds, lingering like a ghostly presence that refused to fade away. For me, the feeling of being watched persisted long after we had left the mansion. Even in the safety of my own home, I would sometimes catch glimpses of movement out of the corner of my eye, only to find nothing there when I turned to look. It was as if the spirits of the mansion had followed me, their unseen eyes still fixated on my every move. Sleep became a luxury I could hardly afford. Night after night, I would lie awake, my mind plagued with visions of the abandoned mansion. The faces from the portraits in the old paintings haunted my dreams, their hollow eyes boring into my soul. I became obsessed with finding answers, desperate to understand what had happened to us that night, and why the mansion seemed so malevolent. I started researching the history of the mansion, trying to uncover its secrets. The more I delved into its past, the more disturbing the revelations became. The mansion had a dark history, one filled with tragedy and despair. It was rumored to have been the site of unspeakable acts, and the spirits of those who had suffered there were said to still roam its halls. One particular story caught my attention, the tale of a young woman who had lived in the mansion long ago. She had been falsely accused of a crime she did not commit, and was locked away in the basement, left to suffer in darkness and solitude. The whispers we had heard that night suddenly took on a chilling significance, as if the tormented soul of that woman was reaching out from beyond the grave, desperate to tell her story. Determined to find closure and put the restless spirits to rest, I convinced my friends to return to the mansion with me. They were hesitant, remembering the terror we had experienced, but they saw the torment in my eyes and agreed to accompany me on this quest for answers. We arrived at the mansion on another dark and stormy night, the rain falling in torrents just as it had before. The sight of the mansion sent shivers down my spine, but I pushed forward, driven by a mixture of fear and curiosity. As we entered the mansion once more, I felt a sense of unease wash over me. The memories of that night flooded back, and I couldn't help but wonder if we were making a grave mistake. But I pressed on, determined to confront the spirits that had haunted me for so long. In the heart of the mansion, we found the room with the old portraits once more. As I stared at the faces on the paintings, I felt a strange connection to the young woman's portrait. Her eyes seemed to plead with me, as if begging for justice and vindication. It was as if her spirit was reaching out to me, drawing me closer to the truth. We made our way to the basement, the same place where we had been trapped all those years ago. The air was heavy with an oppressive silence, broken only by the sound of our footsteps echoing through the darkness. I began to recount the story of the young woman, hoping that by acknowledging her pain, we could somehow release her spirit from its torment. As I spoke, the atmosphere in the basement seemed to change. The oppressive weight lifted slightly, and the air felt less suffocating. But then, A chilling wind swept through the basement, blowing out our flashlights. Darkness enveloped us once more, and a cold terror gripped my heart. The laughter from that night echoed in my ears, and I knew we had awakened something malevolent. In the pitch-black darkness, we fumbled for our flashlights, desperate to find a way out, but the basement seemed to have transformed into a labyrinth, its walls shifting and changing, confounding our every attempt to escape. The whispers returned, louder and more insistent this time. They spoke of anger and betrayal, of suffering and vengeance. It was the voice of the young woman, her spirit unleashing its pent-up fury on those who had wronged her. We tried to reason with the spirit, to beg for forgiveness on behalf of those who had condemned her to such a fate. But the anger was too great, the pain too deep. The mansion itself seemed to be alive with malevolence, feeding off the dark energy of the tormented soul. In a final, desperate attempt to find a way out, I stumbled upon an old journal tucked away in a corner. It belonged to the young woman, and as I read her words, tears welled up in my eyes. Her pain and suffering were laid bare on those pages, and it was clear that she had been a victim of a terrible injustice. With newfound determination, I shared the contents of the journal with my friends, hoping that understanding the young woman's story would somehow appease her spirit. We apologized for the wrongs that had been done to her, promising to remember her and bring her story to light. As we spoke, the mansion began to shake, its walls groaning with an otherworldly force. It was as if the spirit was listening, considering our words, and then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the shaking stopped, and the mansion fell eerily silent. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the darkness seemed to retreat. We cautiously made our way back to the entrance, half expecting something to jump out at us at any moment. But the mansion was still, and the storm outside had abated, as if the spirits had finally found peace. With heavy hearts, we left the mansion for the last time, the weight of the experience still lingering in our souls. The young woman's spirit had found a voice through us, and her story had been set free from the confines of that forsaken place. We never returned to the mansion again, but the memories of that night and the young woman's story stayed with us forever. It served as a haunting reminder of the darkness that lurked in the world, the injustices that could befall the innocent, and the enduring power of unresolved spirits seeking justice and release. And so, we carried the legacy of that terrifying experience, forever changed by the horrors we had witnessed in the abandoned mansion in the woods.